ko Emma toku ingoa. I am the Pest-Free Activator at the Beautification Trust here in Manurewa. So what that really entails is conservation education, so education around our pests and our taonga species. I do a lot of trapping here in our urban reserves, so I primarily have quite an urban focus with my conservation work. I studied at the University of Otago. I studied geography. I'd always had an interest in conservation. I'm a keen tramper, super into the outdoors. And while I was at uni, I did quite a bit of volunteering with Doc on trap lines. I did an internship at the Eco Sanctuary down there. So I was quite involved while I was studying, and obviously my degree was also quite related to this type of work. I finished up my studies and saw this job advertised, and I made the move up. And so now I'm working in the field that I've always wanted to work in. My main role in urban reserves is to do trapping and pest plant eradication. So in a reserve like the one we're in today, I have a trap line set, which I set based on the monitoring that I did. And I come in and I set the traps, and for the first couple of weeks I check them daily. And then it gets a bit more sparse as the catches get less often. So for example, in this forest here, I've got about 4 traps set. Just on a wee line, and I just walk around and check them, rebait them if I need, record my data on Trap NZ, and usually I'll stop to do a little 5-minute bird count as well, just to see how our species are going. So my role sort of directly works in line with the wider predator-free 2050 Aotearoa, and that's because one of our biggest issues is urban pests and urban pest species. So a lot of people, especially here in Tamaki Makaurau, have rats at home, mice at home, possums, and a lot of that is to do with a wider issue we have with waste and food scraps, but it's also to do with rats being pesky and wanting a warm place to go where there's kai. So from my perspective, the 2 ways we can manage the best is through urban trapping and knowing how to manage your waste. So here we've got what is called a T-Rex trap, which is one of the most common traps that we'll give out to people doing urban trapping or any volunteers. They're super good at catching rats and they're really easy to use. So you're going to start by putting the lure into the trap. So you just turn it over on its back and you twist open just like that. You're just going to grab a bit of peanut butter. Make sure you're wearing your gloves so you don't get your human smell. Fill it up like that. Put it back in. Twist it closed, and then you just put it down on the hard surface and use your 2 thumbs until you hear it click. And you can see on the inside how they would run in, and there's that little bit of lure in there. And obviously now we're going to be super careful not to put our fingers anywhere in here, because it's ready and it's activated to go off. As we place it into one of our trap boxes. These boxes are pet proof, child proof, everything proof. So they have the intention of only killing and trapping what is meant to be killed and trapped, which in this case is rats. So what we do is we take the back off, we put our trap in this way. So we want the kill claws facing this hole, and this hole here is where the rats would run in and they'll get caught. So we put the trap inside of the trap boxes, partly for safety, so it keeps children's hands out of it, it keeps pets out of it, it keeps things that aren't meant to be in the trap out of the trap. It's important though that we keep the trap inside of the box towards the back of it, so that nothing which could potentially reach its paw or little hands towards the entrance gets caught. So the rats have to run all the way in to get caught in the trap. If we pretend that this is the rat, it would run in and see the lure, so it would go in to eat it, and here we'd see that the trap would catch it. All you need to do then is pull this trap out of the trap box which it would be in. Make sure you got your gloves on, grab a plastic bag, and you can just empty the rat by unclawing the back into the plastic bag. So you would expect to see possums in your urban backyard. It's really common. Possums are a huge issue in urban spaces as well as in rural spaces. They love basically anything that they can eat, and they love warm things. So that's why you often hear stories of people having possums in their ceiling, under their floorboards. But if you've had the pleasure of not having that issue, you might have still seen them outside in your trees. They're nocturnal, so they're super active at night, and they're also really loud, which makes them really annoying for people when they're trying to sleep. They're also a huge threat to our taonga species. They contribute massively to their decline, and they also contribute to habitat loss. So we've got these traps here which are called flipping timmies, and you set them up on a tree facing this way. So if my backhand here was the tree, facing like that, and the possums run up the bottom here once it's set, obviously, and they get caught just in here. They're super effective and super humane, so they're a really good trap to use. A really key part of our whole trapping scheme is doing monitoring, so that's how we know what is in the area that we're working in. It's pretty hard to trap for the right thing if you've got no idea what is there, and it can also be dangerous if you're trapping for certain things when there's certain other species in an area. So we do monitoring. There's quite a few different ways we can monitor. So a really common way is through tracking tunnels, which you might have seen. They're black plastic tunnels which are on the ground, and they have a card in the middle, and the predators can run in, get some peanut butter from the inside and run out, and based off the paw print that they leave on that card that we leave in the tunnel, we can see what type of animal they are. And here in this reserve we're in today, we usually see rats and stoats and hedgehogs actually. The other type of quite common predator monitoring is through chew cards. So they're little cards that have a lure in them, and it's how we know if there's possums in the area, and they'll chew and we can see their teeth marks, and then we know what sort of trapping we need to do for the possums. So there's also monitoring we can do for our native birds or our taonga species, and those are 5-minute bird counts, and they are about the easiest backyard activity you can do, and another really cool way you can get involved from home. So all you do is you sit outside with a pen and paper, and you can also just find a little identification sheet online which has all the different bird species on it, and all you need to do is be quiet for 5 minutes, look around and listen and see what birds you can either see or hear, and you just write them down, how many you saw, when you saw them, and then you can log all the information online on TrapNZ. Yeah, it's a really cool resource, and it's also something that kids and like families love to do together, so it can be quite a fun activity for people to do too. There is a website called TrapNZ, and it's like the best place where everyone can log their data. So you can log anything from monitoring to trapping to tracking tunnels to bird count. So if you're doing anything related to saving our native species, you can basically log it online, and it's so good because it all leads to that wider Predator-Free 2050, and then we can see what everyone's doing and what the success rate is. For someone like me as an activator, if I look in an area and I see on TrapNZ there's a big empty patch, I know that I need to go ramp up the activity there. Maybe I need to do some trapping, maybe I need to find some volunteers to help me with some trapping or monitoring. So it's like a really easy way for us to record data, and it's also kind of fun because you can see what everyone else is up to. There's quite a few ways that urban households can get involved with predator trapping or pest eradication. One of the main things would be obviously trapping when you see pests, so it's super easy to start trapping at home, and it's been so cool to see the uptake of it here in Tamaki Makaurau, and specifically in like Manurewa and Papakura where I'm based. But there are other ways to sort of manage the issue as well. For example, I mentioned how like rats and mice and other pests love food scraps, so there's like a whole other thing there with like how we can manage our food scraps, and obviously how that sort of targets like a wider environmental issue. So things like composting, using the food scrap services, bukashi bins, we've got the whole lot. Those sorts of things can really help because rats, mice love to run into rubbish bins, they love to eat your food scraps. If you are keen to get involved in trapping at home, thanks. And also how you can do that, you're going to start with wanting to find who your local group is. Usually you can find this online. A pretty good resource is Pest-Free 2050. If you haven't seen the predators in your backyard but you've heard them, for example, if you have rats you might hear them scratching, if you have possums you might hear them screaming, but if you haven't seen them you are going to want to monitor first, just so you can see what you're actually trying to trap, because there's no point in putting out a rat trap if you've got a massive possum to trap. So you can do that either with tracking tunnels or with the cue cards. With your tracking tunnels, you're usually going to want to set them up and you're going to put them out overnight, because a lot of these animals are night creatures or nocturnal. Usually if you do have an issue, you'll probably be able to get the footprints the next day or the day after. Monitoring can be quite a quick process, which is the really good thing about it. If we're using tracking tunnels, you could put your tracking tunnel out overnight, check it the next day. If you've got no footprints, you can just set it again. After a couple of times though, that card that you've used, it might start to get like rain or leaves blowing in it or any interference, so you're going to have to use a new one. So if you put out your tracking tunnels and you don't see anything in it, it probably doesn't mean that there's nothing in your neighbourhood, because this is Aotearoa and there's predators everywhere. But it could mean that your monitoring setup is in the wrong place, or maybe you've not set it up correctly, or maybe you didn't wear gloves doing it and it now smells like human, which animals don't like. So it's always good to try new things, new places, and try it a few times and over a period of time as well. If we just do it once and give up, the problem's never going to eradicate. The next step once you've done your monitoring is obviously to start trapping, and trapping accordingly to your monitoring results. So there's a bunch of different traps for different animals. The most important thing is that we use the right ones for the right animals, so that they're effective and also so that the animals go humanely. If we're getting animals, big animals, sticking their paw into a small trap or something, we're going to end up with injured animals, and that's not what we want at all. Once you've got a catch, so maybe you've put your rat trap out and you've caught a rat, the sort of big question people tend to have is, what do I do with it? There's a couple of options. The first option is our slightly more environmentally friendly option, but a terrible option if you've got dogs or no backyard, which is to dig a hole and bury it. If that's not an option for you, you can do the trusty old double bag and put it in the bin. Honestly, it doesn't smell, and if your rubbish gets picked up every week, then you'll be okay. So there are other ways you can support the Pest-Free 2050 goal if you don't like the idea of trapping, or if trapping's not for you. There's things you can do, such as managing your waste at home, doing things like compost, bukashi, worm farms. You can support your local groups who are doing the trapping. You can go out with them on a day and maybe pick up rubbish while they go off and do the traps. You can support groups financially as well, and you can support them by promoting their services. So if it's not for you, there's still other ways that you can help.